I loved dancing with him. I knew him for a long time, but just as a brother, more or less. He would come in, and I'd know that he'd been outside, and he'd come over and he'd say, "We'll have this one." And see, I always think of it as different to anyone else, absolutely different. And I'd stand up and I'd say, "Breathe on me," because, as I say, he was like my brother. And he'd look at me and clamp his mouth closed, and I'd say, "Breathe on me." And I could smell it, you see. And I said, "No, I'm not dancing with you. You've been drinking." And I just stuck to it. And he would go off, make some funny remark and go and stand down the end with the fellas, and you'd hear a shout and a hoot, these chaps laughing about being turned down. Ed came to our house one night for tea, and he said, "Well, I've joined to go overseas with the infantry." And we all stopped dead. He said, "Yes, I'm going, and Jim Smith's going, and we're all going to go together." And he was full of it. And of course, as it gradually got nearer to the time for him to go away, it was really making us feel, that this thing that had developed between us, how were we going to cope? And it gradually developed into a sexual relationship. And sometime, I think it would be in July, I knew that I was pregnant. And I didn't tell a soul. I used to go to my room and worry and think, is there anything I can do? I must be going to have a baby.
Did you want to get married?
No. When I look back, I don't think I even thought about wanting or not wanting. At that particular time, you had to. The emphasis is on had to. There was no option.
Did he rethink about going away?
Oh, no, he didn't. Because I asked him, could he not defer it? Because I thought he would be able to until after the baby was born. And he said, "No, I've enlisted and I have to go when I go. I've promised so-and-so these names of the men who were his friends." And he said, "We want to go together." I wasn't a fierce sort of a person. I didn't tell him I thought he should go or he shouldn't go. But I was deeply hurt that he wouldn't even make inquiries about it. And he had 3 final leaves. And when he was going on the last one, I said, "Look, if you get another one, please don't come back. Just let them tell me you've gone." I couldn't have faced it, neither could he. It got harder and harder each time saying goodbye, because by this time we were very, very close. And I was his world and he was mine, and he was going and I was staying.
What was it like after he'd gone?
Oh, it was lonely. It was terrible.
The long voyage is over. They've come halfway round the world. These units of the New Zealand Army, our army, will soon be on the march again, swinging across the desert to join other New Zealanders.
The first thing he knew about having a baby, being a father, was when he got to Alexandra and the Māori camp. Someone who was great friends in our family, he came racing down to him and he said, "Hello, Daddy." And that was the first he ever knew. And the letters that came from Māori camp when he was stationed there were very brief and had lots cut out of them, literally cut out with scissors. So it wasn't too long before he was in action in the desert.
Now the Germans were on the run, and the 8th Army was on their heels. So began one of the greatest chases in military history, a chase that only slowed up in Tripoli, 1,500 miles away. In that fast-moving 8th Army, the New Zealand Division was the fastest of them all. Never again did we know what it was to retreat.
They let me know, again, the Minister of Defence, a letter from him, a telegram from him, to say that he was missing, just that he was missing. Regret to tell you that your husband, E.J. Preston, blah, blah, is reported missing in action. Well, of course, I thought the worst, missing. The next telegram that came said missing, presumed a prisoner of war. And that was a few weeks later. And then waiting to hear where he was took ages and ages. And it was some time before I got news through the Red Cross to say that he was in a transit camp somewhere in Italy. It was always somewhere. He wasn't here anymore. He was like as though he was dead. That he just wasn't. I couldn't even bring a vision of him in my mind by that time. So as time went on, and no communication to speak of from him, I just picked up my life and I began to do the things that I'd always loved doing, apart from looking after my boy. And I started going to dances and with family do's and get together and all that was going on in my immediate family. It was the beginning of a new life for me, another path. And from there on, I did part-time work. It was quite an interesting job. It was done through the town hall, and I had my own room there, and I used to type. I was a secretary once, and I used to do typing and bookkeeping, and sometimes I could take my little boy with me when he was growing up. When he got to 2, I could take him with me. And I never got involved with anyone of the opposite sex, except as friends. But I did get involved in this case. You know, I knew him long before I was married. But, you know, just as meeting, this was one of the ones who was a wonderful dancer. And the one that I used to hope would come and dance with me. There was nothing to hide in the relationship. It was quite open. And it never entered my head that anybody would think that I was. But it did develop. And after that, it was totally different. It's a terrible thing to be going to somebody's flat. Some nights we used to go up there. He started by him inviting me to come up and he'd put records on and we'd dance. And that was all there was to it for a while. But then it just developed into a sexual thing. And while I'd never enjoyed sex, I did enjoy it with him. It was just different. It's just the process of how it developed, I suppose. We got on very well, and we could talk about lots of things, which I didn't do very well in those days with just anybody. And he taught me to have confidence in myself. I had none. He really did. He was good for me. And it just developed to that. But the way I felt is something I don't think anybody can understand till they've done it. We had discussed several times. He wanted me never to go back to Ed and to make a life with him. But that wouldn't happen. And I knew it wouldn't happen for the simple reason that I had a son. It would have happened if I'd been single, but I had a son. And Judith, in those days, women had no rights whatever. And I discussed it with my mother. She said, do be careful, you'll have your boy taken off you. And of course that was just out of the question. I wouldn't even consider that. And if I had walked out on Ed, I would have been the villain.